I want to encourage you to keep your Bibles open there to Matthew chapter 5 as we are going to continue in our mini-series entitled Blessed. This morning, I want to kick our time together off with this question. What does it look like? What does it look like for a person to truly live for Christ with a pure and undivided heart? Let me ask you that question again. What does it look like for a person to truly live for Christ, to have a devotion for Jesus Christ that is defined by a pure and undivided heart? Or as the title of our time together this morning, what is the life of someone devoted to Christ, which is true-hearted? What does this life look like? That is a question I think we struggle to answer based on our own understanding of our own will and very little understanding that we may have of God's will. But that's exactly what Jesus' words here in Matthew chapter 5 will be depicting for us. And the amazing thing, if you've never discovered this about the Beatitudes, this section of the Sermon on the Mount, is that Jesus doesn't just give us these Beatitudes in some random order. No, Jesus gives us these Beatitudes in a very specific order so that we might gather an understanding of what it first means. How do we get into the kingdom, which we looked at last Sunday morning. But this morning, we're going to talk about what it looks like once you are in the kingdom. What is the life supposed to look like of someone who is in Jesus Christ, who is in his kingdom? What does that life look like? And I find it amazing here this morning as I stand before you that last Sunday morning we talked about three ideas that I think we so greatly struggle with. The idea of being helpless, the idea of being broken, but most of all, the idea of meekness, how difficult it is to turn over the reins to God and say, you take control, God. But when you do allow God to take control, then these things that we're going to talk about this morning are going to be truly part of your existence. Are you following me? So as we strive this morning, there are three things that must be prevalent in our lives once we gain entrance into God's kingdom. And the first is this. Write this down. Jot this down in your notes. You must have a hunger for righteousness. A hunger for righteousness. In other words, you have to have, good folks, an appetite for godliness, a craving within your soul. Right now, a craving, a desire to be right with God. Jesus says in verse number 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, I've highlighted that in your Bible study outline. But notice the last part of that statement, for they shall be satisfied. We're going to come to that in just a few moments. But the first thing that I hope everybody in this room, including myself, can understand from Jesus' words is Jesus is saying, I want you now part of my kingdom, I want you to have a hunger, a devotion for me. I want you to crave me and my righteousness. And that naturally brings me to a question that all of us are going to face this very day. What is it in your life that you are consumed by? What's consuming your life right now? You know, for some of us, there are need-based things that consume our lives. It can be a health condition for ourselves. It can be a health condition for our spouse or our loved ones, and that consumes our mind. Every day we wake up thinking about our loved one and the hurt that they're feeling because of the physical ailment that they have, or we wake up every day because of some physical ailment in our lives, and we feel like that consumes us. But folks, those things do not have to consume or define you. And there's more things. I could stand up here for the next 30 minutes and talk about things that consume our lives. Am I right about that, church? And I think it's purely natural that in a room this size with as many people as we have here this morning, there may be dozens and dozens of different things that are consuming our lives. But again, what is it in your life that you are driven to think about? Some of us men in this room this morning, if we're honest, if we look back through our lives, we can see periods in our lives where we were driven to think about things, consumed by things that in the end, the result of our life, when we are 6 feet under, when our soul has departed this body, we thought about things for years, maybe months, years, decades, that really gave us no true benefit in our life. I can't speak for you ladies, but I'm sure that there has to be those things that consume your life, that you spend days, weeks, months, or even years thinking about, that at one point, like we talked about last Sunday, you thought it had great value, didn't you? But now you're a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and you look back and go, yeah, really, Jonathan, it didn't bring any true benefit to my life. I think one of the most amazing things about moving to the state of Texas, for me, growing up in Alabama and eventually marrying a Texan, as I like to say, getting here as quick as I could. You're supposed to laugh at that part because everybody usually does. I think one of the most amazing things for me was seeing people's appetites. Texans love to eat. You know, a few months ago, I was out in California, my wife and I, and we spent about a week out there. And by the end of that week, guess what? I want to be back in Texas. I miss my family, of course, my kids, but there was one thing I missed. That was Texas food. Don't we often have an appetite for food? I think most of us in this room, now I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's a real struggle for us sometimes to understand Jesus' concept here in Matthew chapter 5, because most of us in this room, can't speak for all, but I think most of us have never really and truly experienced a moment in our life where we were truly starving. Most of us have feasted upon plenty most of our lives. You know, even as a child, I look back, and I kid with my family about this all the time. Jennifer and I were having dinner on Friday night, and we talked about how our family structures were so different. In my family, if we ate out one time a week, that was a big deal. I remember getting so excited because we were going to go out to eat on a Friday night. It was something I looked forward to all week long. Why? Because every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'd come home from school, and I'd say, Mom, what's for dinner? And she'd say rutabaga turnips and all this other stuff that I didn't, especially butter beans. I'm sorry, please forgive me, but butter beans were not my favorite. But all week we'd eat all those healthy, yummy foods that I didn't appreciate back then, of course. Now I do. But then Friday night we'd go out and eat, and it was such a privilege. My wife, on the other hand, she was telling me about they ate out way too much. Is there anybody in this room that feels like your family eats out too much? Yeah, but I love how Jim Gaffigan, does anybody know who Jim Gaffigan is, the comedian? He kind of pokes fun at us a little bit about our hungers and our appetites here within this country. I mean, could you imagine as he talks about going over into some third world country and trying to explain to them what an appetizer is? Oh, this is the food that we eat before we eat our food. Try to explain that to someone who is starving, who has done without most of their lives. It wouldn't make sense. So I think to us, just on the opposite side, we have to discover in our life what it means to have a hunger fulfilled by none other than Jesus Christ. People often ask me the question, Jonathan, how do I get into heaven? I truly believe the only way we get into heaven is by hungering for a righteousness that is outside of ourselves. Did you hear me, church? We have to hunger and thirst for a righteousness that is outside of ourselves. The only way that we're going to receive true righteousness in our lives is one that has been granted to us by Jesus Christ. And if you've been in Cliff and I's class on Wednesday night, you know how important it is that Christ gave you righteousness. It's one thing for God to say you're forgiven, to bring your bank account down to zero, but God didn't leave you at a zero. No, He filled you up with the righteousness of His own Son, Jesus Christ. Ultimately, though, church, if you're not hungering for Jesus Christ and His righteousness, you are hungering for the wrong things. The reason why many of us in this room, from time to time in our lives, and those outside of us, maybe that's you this morning. Maybe the reason why some of us aren't hungering and thirsting for the righteousness of Jesus Christ is that we've already filled our spiritual bellies full of junk food. The junk food of this world is filling our minds. And folks, I could stand up here and give you every aspect of junk food that we fill our minds with. And some of you would be offended by some of the things that I call junk food that some of you think are absolutely essential to your life. But there is nothing essential to your life more so than Jesus Christ and His righteousness. You know, if you will pursue Jesus Christ and His righteousness, you will truly be satisfied. What was it Guy opened up our worship with this morning? John chapter 6, right? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Church living for Christ with an undivided heart starts right here. You either today have a hunger and a thirst for the righteousness of Jesus Christ, or you don't. There's really no in between. The second thing that our lives must obtain, but in this case demonstrate, is that of mercy. A life that demonstrates mercy. In other words, you and I as people of God, we need to be able and willing to demonstrate mercy to others. Verse 7, Jesus clearly says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I want to tell you something, church. Something that truly changed my perspective on my own life and my dealings with other people, and that is this: all of us together are recipients of extraordinary mercy. All of us are recipients of extraordinary mercy, not just plain Jane, everyday sort of mercy. No, we're talking about extravagant mercy to a degree that our minds can't even begin to comprehend. If there's anybody on this earth that ought to understand the concept of mercy, it ought to be us as Christians. If anybody on this earth could comprehend the concept of extraordinary mercy, it should be you and I. Why, church? Because we've all received extraordinary mercy, and yet the temptation I face, and I believe you're facing this same temptation right now in your lives. I believe the quick temptation that we face is that, yes, we've received this extraordinary mercy, but we are very quick sometimes to withhold mercy from other people, aren't we? We do that with people in our families. We do that with people in our workplace. The reality is, church, sometimes we do it right in this very building. I've received more mercy in my life than I could ever count. It's sad, though, when I began to realize the amount of mercy that I've given, I can recall so many of those opportunities. You know what that tells me? I've got a lot of mercy left to give. Mercy means two basic concepts this morning that I want you to quickly think about. You're going to talk about these tonight in your life groups or maybe this afternoon. But the first thing mercy truly means, and I want you to remember this, church, it means generosity towards someone without the expectation of a return. Say it again. Mercy means giving to someone, towards someone extravagantly, expecting nothing in return or repayment. When's the last time, think about it, when is the last time you were extravagant and generous in caring for other people without any expectation that that person may repay in kind? Folks, we have a tendency in our churches, in our families, in our workplace. The most familiar statement of my life has been this: you scratch my back. What, church? You scratch my back, I'll what? Is that in the Bible? No. In fact, the truth is, I've never scratched Jesus' back. He gave me everything he had and then some. Mercy also means, please don't forget this, mercy also means complete forgiveness. Church, every one of us in this room who are Christians this morning have experienced complete forgiveness. You know, one day we're all going to stand in the courtroom of the Almighty God. And those of us who are Christians, who have served Him faithfully, none of us are going to receive a reduced sentence. You know how that works, right? Somebody goes before a human judge and they are guilty and they are facing a certain punishment, and the judge says, all right, this is what by law I can give you, but I'm going to only give you this much. It's a reduced sentence. Do you think that judge in that situation, if it was you, would you feel like that judge was being merciful? Certainly you would. But in this case, none of us are going to stand before God and Him say, well, I'm going to give a reduced sentence. No. If you're a Christian, you will stand before Almighty God and be declared completely forgiven. Amen? I think this may be for me, maybe not for some of you. Maybe you're really good at granting mercy. Maybe you are one of the most merciful people of this world. Maybe that's you this morning, but me, I got to admit, it's a lot easier preached than it is lived, right? One of the most difficult aspects of being true-hearted in our undivided devotion to Jesus Christ is learning, church, how to demonstrate mercy in our relationships. Listen, I got a wife sitting over there. I try not to put my family too much on the spot, make too much of a statement about them in sermons, but I will say this. My wife has been more merciful to me than I could ever deserve. Any other husbands feel that way in this room this morning? Some of us men, in our imperfections, can make it tough on our wives. I guess on the opposite side, some of our wives and their imperfections can make it tough on us husbands. But the only way a marriage works, truly, are you listening, church? Because this is something I think we need to hear. The only way our marriages survive is if they're filled with mercy. And the only way we get that mercy is by learning of the mercy that has been given to us. How much mercy have you received? How much mercy are you willing to give? Third and finally this morning, let's talk about an undivided heart. That's really what we're here to focus on today. Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart. Charles led us in a song this morning that really touches on those words. Pure in heart, O God, help me to be, for they shall see God. You know what's amazing if you study the Gospels? Jesus always confronted the religious leaders of his day. And he would say, you know what, guys? You don't have a pure heart. You're like whitewashed tombs. You basically paint the outside of the tomb, but inside your heart is nothing more than dead man's bones. Folks, Jesus is all about changing hearts. Do you believe that? The psalmist David cried out, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Church, if you don't have a clean heart, you'll never be different. Let me see if I can illustrate it like this. Imagine you go on vacation. And you go away for a week or two and you come back home and you discover that your refrigerator has died. Anybody ever have that happen to you? So you open the door and that stench, hits you, right? So you go ahead and you pay somebody to come fix a part on that refrigerator and it's going to work again, right? So you decide it's time to clean out your refrigerator, but you decide to clean out your refrigerator the way we clean up our lives. Well, what you do is you shut the door on that refrigerator, you get some warm water, and you just start washing the outside, and you shine it up pretty and bright, and you say, this looks beautiful. And you're screaming, now wait a second, Jonathan, there's no way that's going to get rid of the stench on the inside. You've got to clean the inside. You know what my response to that is? Duh. But there are a lot of us that treat our lives like that refrigerator. We polish up the outside. We walk in our church buildings polished and shined, want to have everybody believe that we have got it all together. But the whole time this sermon and last Sunday morning has been telling us, if you want to have it all together, you first got to admit, I don't have it all together. I stink on the inside. Your heart, church, will never be made clean through religion. Did you know that? Your heart will never be made clean by attending every service of your life. How does a heart get clean? Is it made clean by keeping the law? Is it made clean by, I'm going to try harder? Is it made clean by saying, I'm going to turn over a new leaf? No, it's made clean by having a relationship with Jesus Christ. Do you this morning have a relationship with Jesus Christ? Because everything that is good, everything that is profitable flows from a loving relationship with God's only Son. The reality is this morning that in my lifetime, in your lifetime, I am never on my own going to be perfect before a just and holy God, but I can be surrendered. Let me say it again, church. We can never be perfect, but we can be surrendered. We can't have a perfect heart, but we can truly have an undivided heart. The problem for me and for others is that throughout my life, and I'm sure yours as well, haven't there been those things that have tried to divide your heart? Haven't there been those things that have tried to take your attention and your devotion away from Jesus Christ? Some of us have one half of our life pursuing God and the other half pursuing the things of this world. And Jesus says, listen to me, I don't accept that half-hearted worship. Those who worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. And that's the worshiper I'm seeking. That's what Jesus says. So maybe you're here this morning and you say, Jonathan, I want a pure heart. I want to have an undivided heart. Jonathan, you tell me, how do I obtain that? Well, the first good step this morning is what we're doing. We're letting God's word, we're letting the Son of God tell us the type of life to live. You can listen to any preacher give you his idea about the life that you should live, but it will never get you where you want to go like Jesus' words. You have to first realize this morning that you are spiritually bankrupt. And that will lead you, as we talked about last Sunday morning, to brokenness before the Almighty God, which will then lead you to have a humbled heart. You will humble yourself before God, and you allow Him to take control of the reins of your life through that meekness. And then what happens? Well, it creates this hunger and this thirst for Jesus Christ and His righteousness. God, I'm going to hunger for you. And then when you do that, you experience His grace and His mercy, and then that in turn leads you to be merciful. And if you've experienced mercy, you're ready to give it. And then it comes down to, again, having an undivided heart. We're going to sing a song of encouragement this morning. If you're not a Christian today, if you haven't given your life to Jesus Christ, I'm going to ask you, who are you serving? Because whoever that master is in your life, that master will never satisfy you like Jesus. So if you need to put on Christ in your life this morning, I pray that you will. But if you're a Christian and you are trying, you are striving to somehow please God, but you're doing it with a half-heartedness, you will never achieve what you desire. I surrender how much? Say it, church. I surrender all. If you're not surrendering all this morning, I pray that you will. Let's stand and sing.